Hello chess lovers, welcome back to Chess Ventura channel. In today's video, we're going to analyze an exciting game from the 1966 World Chess Championship. This match featured the reigning champion, Tigran Petrosian, against the title challenger, Boris Spassky. It was the 7th game of their 24-game match, where Petrosian successfully defended the title he had won 3 years earlier. In this game, Petrosian played as black, while Spassky took the white pieces. The game began with white advancing the d-pawn, and black responding with the knight to f6. White followed with the knight to f3, and black replied with the pawn to e6. Then, the white bishop developed to g5, while black pushed the pawn to d5. This opening is known as the Tory attack with the classical defense variation. White continued by developing the knight to d2, and black brought out the bishop to e7. White advanced the pawn to e3, and black developed the knight to d7. White then positioned the bishop on d3, preparing to clear the way for castling kingside. At this point, Petrosian struck back by challenging White's central pawn with a push to c5. White reinforced the center with the pawn to c3, and black responded with the pawn to b6. This move aimed to create a strong pawn chain while also preparing the black bishop's development to b7. By the 8th move, Spassky castled kingside. Petrosian followed by positioning his bishop on b7, and White advanced the knight to e5, offering an exchange. Petrosian accepted, capturing the knight, and White recaptured with the pawn, creating an attack on the black knight at f6. Petrosian retreated his knight to d7, simultaneously attacking White's pawn and offering an exchange of dark squared bishops. Spassky declined the offer, pulling his bishop back to f4 to defend the pawn on e5. Petrosian moved his queen to c7, increasing the pressure on White's pawn at e5. This move also set up the possibility of queenside castling and supported the potential pawn push to c4. In response, Boris Spassky strengthened his e5 pawn by developing his knight to f3. Petrosian followed with a pawn push to h6, preparing to advance his pawn to attack White's dark-squared bishop. Anticipating this, the bishop retreated to g3, ready for black's next move, a push to g5. At this point, Boris Spassky displayed a brilliant idea by sacrificing his pawn on b4. The plan was that if black's c-pawn captured the b4 pawn, White could recapture with the a-pawn, opening the c-file and preventing black from castling queenside. However, Petrosian, aware of this plan, refused to take the bait. Instead, he played h5, aiming to trap White's dark-squared bishop. Spassky quickly countered with h4. When black captured the pawn on h4, White chose not to recapture but instead moved the bishop to f4. Why didn't White recapture the h4 pawn? The idea was to leave black with doubled pawns on the h-file, which would hinder black's attacking chances. If White's bishop had taken the h4 pawn, black could have replied with the bishop capturing on h4. After White's knight recaptured, black's queen could take the pawn on d5, simultaneously attacking the pawn on c3. With the advantage in pawns, black would have gained a strong position. For this reason, in the actual game, Spassky didn't recapture, but instead moved his bishop to f4. This was White's best option. Following this, Petrosian secured his king with a queenside castle, and Spassky responded with a4. White's plan was clear, to break through black's kingside defenses by steadily advancing his pawns. At move 17, Petrosian took nearly 20 minutes to decide his next step. After careful consideration, he played the pawn to c4, attacking White's bishop. The bishop retreated to e2, and Petrosian followed up with a6. This move was critical for black, aiming to stop White from advancing pawns on the queen side. For example, if White pushed a5, black could respond with b5. If White then pushed b5, black would play a5. This sequence would effectively seal the queen side, ensuring the black king remained safe from White's pieces. In the actual game, Spassky played king to h1, creating space for his rook to move to g1. Black responded with rook to g8, taking control of the semi-open file and adding pressure to the g2 pawn. White countered by moving his rook to g1, strengthening the defense of g2. Petrosian then lifted his rook to g4, planning to double his rooks on the g-file. After White moved his queen to d2, the black rook returned to g8. White pushed a5, offering a pawn exchange. Naturally, black declined by advancing the pawn to b5. As a result, black created a strong pawn structure, forming a solid chain that kept the queen side locked and rendered white's bishops largely ineffective. White continued by repositioning his rook to d1. Black then placed his bishop on f8. In this position, Spassky made a less precise move with knight to h2, intending to attack black's rook. Most players would likely retreat the rook to g7, but Petrosian found a brilliant move. The knight captured the pawn on e5. This move allowed white to capture the rook. When white's knight took the rook, black responded by recapturing with a pawn. Now, black had two powerful pawns controlling critical squares near white's king. These pawns would later prove decisive in Petrosian's victory. White then pushed the pawn to e4, trying to tempt black into capturing it. However, had black taken the pawn, white's bishop would capture the knight, threatening the queen. If black's queen then captured the bishop, white's queen could deliver checkmate on d8. Recognizing this trap, Petrosian avoided the poisoned pawn and played his bishop to d6. White replied with queen to e3. Although black could now capture the central pawn on e4, Petrosian remained calm and moved his knight to d7, offering an exchange of dark squared bishops. The exchange was accepted. White's bishop captured black's bishop, and black's queen recaptured. White followed up by moving his rook to d4, applying pressure to black's pawn on g4. The idea was that after white's e-pawn captured on d5, the rook could target the g4 pawn. Petrosian foiled this plan by advancing his e-pawn to e5, threatening white's rook. After white retreated the rook to d2, Petrosian pushed the pawn to f5. By move 30, black's pawn structure remained intact. Petrosian demonstrated masterful control, using his pawns to launch a powerful attack. The pawns dominated key squares in white's territory, creating an imposing position that left Spassky with limited options. In this position, the best response for white would have been to capture the f5 pawn, but Spassky made a critical mistake by capturing the d5 pawn instead. This allowed black to advance the f4 pawn, threatening white's queen. Spassky responded with another inaccurate move, placing his queen on e4. Petrosian seized the opportunity, playing his knight to f6, simultaneously attacking the queen and a pawn. White moved the queen to f5, delivering a check, which black answered by moving the king to b8. At this point, the engine suggests the best move for white would be to play the bishop to d1. For example, if black's bishop captures a pawn, white can immediately capture the black bishop with the rook, followed by black's knight taking the rook. White could then capture the g4 pawn with their bishop, and black's knight would capture another pawn. However, even with this variation, white would struggle to keep up with black's strong position, especially with black's pawn advantage and the free pawns that would be difficult to stop. Returning to the actual game, Spassky tried another idea by playing f3, aiming to disrupt black's pawn structure on the king side. Predictably, Petrosian declined the challenge and moved his bishop to c8, threatening white's queen. After the queen retreated to b1, black advanced the g3 pawn. White then moved the rook to g1 to strengthen the position. Petrosian responded with h3, attacking the g2 pawn. White attempted to defend with bishop to f1, but Petrosian countered with rook to h8. White captured the pawn on g3, and Petrosian recaptured with the bishop. This set up a devastating discovered check threat if black's bishop were to capture white's bishop. At this point, the best move for white was to move the king to g1, which Spassky played. Next, Petrosian captured white's bishop with his own, and the king recaptured the black bishop. Black then advanced the e4 pawn, increasing the pressure. If white captured the pawn, black's f-pawn would march forward, threatening checkmate in 7 moves. In the game, Spassky chose to protect the pawn with queen to d1. Here, Petrosian found a brilliant move by sacrificing his knight to g4. When white captured the knight with the pawn, Petrosian capitalized on the position by advancing the g3 pawn, creating a powerful checkmate threat with the rook on h1. If white tried to prevent the mate with king to g1, black's queen would move to h6, leading to an inevitable checkmate in 4 moves. In the actual game, Spassky tried to defend with rook to g2, but after black's pawn captured the rook, Spassky resigned on move 43. If the game had continued, for example, with white's king capturing the pawn, black's rook would give a check on h1. The white king would retreat to g1, and black's queen would move to h6, creating a mate threat in 2 moves. White could delay the mate with queen to f3, but after black's pawn captured the queen, victory for black would be inevitable. And there you have it, the magnificent game between Tigran Petrosian and Boris Spassky. We hope this analysis expands your chess knowledge and inspires your gameplay. That's all for today's discussion. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next chess video.